What is going on, YouTube? It's Ed here with an Alice in Borderland review. I know I'm like super late to this, but I've been a little busy, but now I'm not so much more busy. And I finally was able to finish all of season two, and I guess the series in a way. But yeah, this is going to be my spoiler review. I don't have a spoiler free one. So if you haven't seen Alice in Borderland, I suggest you go watch it. It is warning is a little not demented, but it's a little disturbing in the sense that it's very much like Squid Games, is like the Japanese version, but a little bit twisted, um, and definitely arguably a very different premise and all, but it's not the same. But this came out before Squid Games, but then um, with season one, and then when season two came out after Squid Games came out, like this got a ton of press, or like this it got a lot of interest because people are like, oh, it's kind of like Squid Games because people play these games and they die. Like that's the general premise. But yeah, overall, that's pretty much what it's about. So this is gonna be my review of both season one and two. Um, let's go. All right, so there are gonna be spoilers, FYI. Sorry about that. So in terms of the series as a whole, I would say Alice in Borderland was pretty crazy. I think I the biggest cliffhanger from both season one and most of season two is like why, like what is going on in Alice in Borderland, like why? Because like the whole even the title series Alice in Borderland kind of plays a lot to Alice in Wonderland. It's like, okay, so Alice in Wonderland, you know she gets transported to this other world where it's kind of like nuts. I guess to say the least. Like you meet all these different people. I actually don't really, now that I think about it, I don't really know the story behind Alice in Wonderland aside from knowing like the Mad Hatter and the Queen of Hearts and other random things. And and in my brain I'm actually confusing it a little bit with Wizard of Oz, but I know that's not the same thing. Um but in this place, I don't know how much. I mean, now that I look back, like the title does give a little bit of hint to what they're talking about. But in general, the whole thing, this whole scenario was just so weird, right? In the first season, we had Arisu, who is the main character in the middle here. He's a gamer who doesn't have like a whole lot of direction in life. All he does is play games. And then he gets transported into this world with his two best friends where they have to basically fight for their lives and play a series of games where each suit, or like where they have to acquire different all 52 cards in a deck of cards. Each suit represents a different type of game, and each card uh, represents the level. So a level two, or so a two of hearts represents a certain type of game and a difficulty level of two. Whereas like a 10 of hearts will be a certain type of game, or 10 of clubs will be a certain type of game. And the level T is at level T. The level of difficulty is at 10, right? So that's kind of how it works. And eventually, they meet more people within this world. They meet there is Usagi, and then Kuina and Chishiya, and all these folks who like they meet all these different characters, and you don't and one by one you kind of get to know their backgrounds as they do some flashbacks and whatnot. So overall, it's pretty interesting. In season two, or in season one, they eventually go to this area called the beach where a bunch of players are essentially hanging out at. And they live there. It's run by this like kind of like eccentric overlord type person. And a bunch of stuff ensues where it's like, all right, um like the idea is to, like, if we get all the cards, like this game will end, right? That's like that's what they're hoping for. But then there's like betrayal, treachery, and all this craziness that goes on in the end of season one. And then was also revealed at season one is that the main characters, they find where like the game makers are. They find the people who are arranging all these games, And but the thing is that they're all dead. They're actually participants themselves. And then at the end of the season one, what is also revealed is like um it's like part of the is now like season two will be the end game, because up until that point they've gotten all the cards between the ace through 10, all the different suits. But now that they've gotten all the different suits and all of those cards, there's 16 cards that have all the face cards, the jack, queen, kings of the face cards, right, of all the suits. So those are the only ones left, and pretty much season two is dedicated to all of getting those 16 cards. Now, so season two is pretty crazy, I would say, because right off the bat we get the king of clubs, who is basically just mowing down people. He's just walking through the streets, just shooting the living crap out of everybody. He's killing players, and so basically he's not even like a game in itself. Like he's not like a controlled game in a controlled area. He's just like a like I mean, he's almost in a way like an NPC type thing, just like roaming around the streets of Tokyo and or wherever they are. I mean, it's Tokyo, but I forget what this. I don't know what district. I think it's Shibuya, maybe, or Shinjuku. I honestly have no idea. And there's just going around killing people, right? So, and to get his card or to defeat him, you just have to kill him, which apparently is harder, easier said than done. Even though I swear to God, like some of these, there's not a whole lot of like logical way of killing him, but like I feel like there's so many people that can just could have done it super easily. But anyways, so Arisu and his friends, they go through, play more games, but now because they are playing um all these folks who are essentially hold the face cards. So first off, they play the king of clubs. Then we see Chishiya. Sorry if I saying that wrong. He goes for the I think the jack of I think it was like Jack of Clubs or something like that. They introduce another character named Aguni, and it's just um it gets pretty crazy because at this point in the game, there I mean the number of players are just dwindling down, right? Like they're getting kind of low because people are just dying left and right. Another thing they also discover is that the people who are who are holding the face cards, they were previous players of like um a different game, and they chose to stay within this world. So these are people who are chose to stay within this world and and continue to play the game or even facilitate the game, which is kind of demented if you think about it. Like, why would you want to stay in here? Even though most of these people, like they have lives, they may or may not have great lives back in the real world. Now, the big reveal at the end of the series is that all of this is basically limbo, like a limbo slash purgatory. So what happened in Tokyo was that a meteorite hit the city and it basically injured a crap ton of people, right? Like probably a couple thousand people. And where our main character Arisu and his two best friends and everybody was transported basically into this like limbo world where like the god of death or something is like there's like too much death here, right? And he's allowing these people to basically fight for their lives. So if they die in the Borderland world, I'm just gonna call it that, then they die in real life. But if they survive the Borderland world, then they get to basically return to their real life, but they'd have no recollection of what they did in that limbo slash purgatory type of world. And that was the big reveal at the end. And I don't know how I feel about that. So, like, basically, like all the games and all that stuff, the cards, borderline meaningless because the whole thing was about them fighting for their will to live. So if the game ends and you are still alive, you essentially you have the will to live all of this, which also basically means is like, I mean, obviously you don't know what's going on, but like, and people are forced to play the game, so it's not like you can just hide out. but I feel I don't know. Like I was going off on a tangent before I caught myself of a mistake. But anyways, I don't know if I like that ending. The whole fact of the matter is that, oh yeah, this is all kind of fake, and the people that died in the games are actually the people who just died from getting hit from the meteors. The people who are in a previous game were just the people who were closer to the blast of the meteorite, so they were entered into that world quicker than the people who were farther away from the meteorite and the blast. I don't know. I don't know if I like that all that much. I At one point, like when they meet the Queen of Hearts and the last boss of the this whole thing, she starts going into all these different tangents of like, oh, actually, like the world you're in right now is like thousands of years in the future, and you're actually in a suspended animation, and humans are immortal. So they create these like virtual, like augmented realities to kind of like excite themselves, right? And then it's like, no, actually it's not that. It's you're actually mental health patients. You're just imagining all this, and all the other players are just other patients and stuff. So they keep like throwing these like curveballs to kind of like give you all these kind of like weird like scenarios. But at the end of the day, it was like, oh, actually it's just limbo or something like that. And I can't help but think like I wish they went with a different story explanation. Like I kind of wish it was a little bit more twisted. Like, for me, I kind of wish it was the futuristic thing, because at one point we start seeing not only is it a deserted Japan, but also it starts everything starts aging super quickly. Because in season 2, we start seeing vines and like vegetation grow like crazy in middle of Tokyo, and it's like, well, this type of growth can only happen over the course of like a couple hundred years, So it's like time is clearly being sped up in some shape or form, and I wish this was, I don't know, maybe because I'm a nerd and like I like sci-fi and stuff like that, but I wish it was some kind of post-apocalyptic type of situation where like, all right, thousands of years in the future, mankind has like virtually kind of destroyed itself. The only people that are left are the rich or something like that, or like an advanced civilization. And they have the earth is no longer inhabited by normal people because like the rich hoarded way too much money. Maybe it's like even like a social commentary on how we live our lives. So the rich, in order to entertain themselves, they've invented time travel, or some form of time travel where they're able to import people from the past into their future and force them to fight each other and survive in these like sadistic games. So a little bit, so like in some ways it's almost like Squid Games, where you have the rich who controls these games. But in this case, these are just rich people who are bored and they want to do this, and they do this because just to entertain themselves. And maybe the grand prize at the end is like, okay, whoever wins all these games, you get to either become some of the game makers, like the way we see in season 2, or maybe they get to stay in the future and get to be a part of that elite group of rich, powerful people who have like, I don't know, maybe they're not necessarily immortal like the way they put it into like the way they talk about it in season 2, but they're rich and powerful, right? Like they somehow control this alternate world that they have, or not alternate, but like future world, because that, which is why would it would explain, the vegetation growth and all that stuff, but they don't do that. Instead, they go with this limbo. So I don't know if that's better. That's just kind of how I would like it. So if that's a terrible idea, oh well. But like, I don't know. I just thought I wasn't crazy about the whole limbo thing. But then there's a surprise at the end where the screen, where like the last shot is they focus in on the Joker card, which is a wild card. Um, I don't know if this now in the manga, in the original manga, this has already ended. Like there's no, I don't, as far as I know, this is a series ender, right? I think I'm not sure if there's a cliffhanger where they're gonna like maybe make a season 2, or I mean season 3, I mean, or do maybe like another version where it's not part of manga series. and they're gonna do more of Alice in Borderland, like, and but do a little twist, or maybe they're implying that even in this real world now where they woke up, it's still a game. I don't know what the whole thing is. Maybe it's just supposed to be ominous. It forces the reader to think and not really get a conclusion, or like maybe forces the watchers or like us as the audience to just come up with our own conclusions. Very similar to what's that called? Inception, where the end of Inception, they Christopher Nolan basically was like, hey, like you, the way it ends is his way of like just telling the audience like you get to decide whether he's still in a dream or not in a dream. So in the same way, maybe this is like letting the audience decide like, oh, like does the Joker card mean something or doesn't it? So I don't know. I like those type of twists. I just wasn't crazy about um the whole limbo thing. But anyways, but overall, I really enjoyed this series. How they figure out to play these games, how they strategize. I really like it. The characters are very interesting. All the different new characters that they introduce, and like also the background of like Chishiya's character. Like we find out that he's a doctor who who's like a surgeon, and he's not crazy about like his old life because he had to basically help screw over, or not help screw over, but like because of like rich people, he couldn't give life-saving surgery to certain to poorer people, like like they got higher up, they were able to buy their way into organ transplants and stuff like that, and people who have less means were just they just died, which is something like I think we all know happens, we just can't prove it type of thing. So yeah, anyways, kind of crazy. And I really liked all the characters. Overall, this is a great series. I really highly, if you can stomach like all like the blood, gore, and the craziness, I highly recommend you go watch it. This is a great series for anyone who's interested in this type of stuff. If you like Squid Games, then this is gonna be something that you're gonna probably enjoy. So, anyways, that's my take on Alice in Borderlands, both seasons 1 and 2. Um, if you if you watch this whole thing, since there's spoilers, sorry, and you haven't watched it and you heard all of it, maybe you might not be as interesting. But I think now that you know the end, but overall, you can still figure out like which characters survive, which don't, how they play through all the games. That part is still really interesting. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll talk later. Later, guys.